From a distance, the Kingdom of France in the late 18th century looked unshakable. It was a massive, ancient oak tree, deeply rooted in centuries of absolute rule. But beneath the soil, the roots were entirely rotted. When a 20-year-old Louis XVI ascended the throne in 1774, he inherited a kingdom on the brink of financial collapse. He opened the national treasury and found it completely empty. Decades of persistent warfare had already drained the nation's accounts. On top of that, the daily expense of running an intensely extravagant court here at the Palace of Versailles pulled millions more from the state's dwindling reserves. Despite this massive deficit, Louis XVI decided to help 13 American colonies fight for independence against a common enemy, Britain. That war added over 1 billion livres, the standard French currency of the time, to a debt that had already surpassed 2 billion. To keep the government running, the state had to spend an increasing percentage of its budget entirely on interest payments for its loans. Beneath the gilded surface of the monarchy, the financial foundation was completely hollowed out. Collapse was a mathematical certainty. This 3D pyramid chart illustrates the strict structure of the old regime, the feudal system that divided all of French society into 3 rigid tiers, known as estates. The tiny peak at the top belongs to the clergy and the nobility. These top 2 estates controlled the vast majority of the wealth and land. Crucially, they enjoyed a specific legal privilege. They paid absolutely no taxes to the state. This forced the entire financial burden of the nation onto the massive bottom tier, the third estate. Peasants and workers were forced to pay direct land taxes, indirect taxes on everyday goods like salt, and tithes, which were mandatory taxes levied by the church. The breaking point arrived with a severe winter. Bad harvests caused the price of bread to skyrocket, meaning the working poor could no longer afford enough food to survive. This frequent occurrence was called a subsistence crisis, an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are directly endangered. Wages stayed flat while inflation surged. Systemic oppression created an environment where the basic act of surviving became impossible for the majority of the population. Violence was the only remaining reaction. Within the massive Third Estate, an educated middle class of merchants and lawyers circulated radical texts. These new Enlightenment ideas argued that a society should truly be based on merit, directly challenging the ancient idea that kings possessed a divine right to rule. By the brutal summer of 1789, these philosophical debates spilled out into the streets as a physical reality. Panicked by the growing unrest, the king ordered military troops to march directly into Paris. On July 14th, angry citizens fought back. They stormed the Bastille, a medieval fortress and prison, to seize stockpiled weapons. The Bastille operated as the ultimate symbol of the king's absolute power. Breaching its walls meant dismantling the crown's authority by force. The storming of the Bastille took the abstract philosophical anger of the working class and forged it into an unstoppable physical rebellion. This historical map shows the rapid contagion of the revolt. The black arrows trace how urban violence in Paris acted as a massive catalyst, igniting spontaneous peasant rebellions that rapidly spread throughout the French countryside. Simultaneously, representatives of the Third Estate formed the National Assembly, aggressively drafting a constitution designed to strip the king of his absolute veto power. They codified their demands in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. This document established the radical concept that all men are born with natural, inalienable rights, like freedom of speech, that no government can take away. In September 1792, the newly elected assembly, known as the Convention, dismantled the monarchy entirely and declared France a republic. Removing the king created a massive power vacuum. France descended into extreme internal violence and instability, which eventually allowed a military general named Napoleon Bonaparte to seize control as emperor. Despite the subsequent bloodshed and the return of a dictatorship, the core architecture of absolute divine right monarchy had been permanently and irreversibly shattered. The revolution's most powerful legacy is the invention of a completely new global language of politics and human rights. This animated map shows how the core concepts of liberty and democratic governance escaped Europe. Like seeds carried on the wind, they were exported across the globe over the next century to India, China, Africa, and South America. Colonized nations did not simply copy the French model. They innovated and weaponized these concepts to fuel their own unique anti-colonial independence movements against European empires. The violent destruction of France's oppressive class system provided the philosophical blueprint for global liberation movements for centuries to come. The radical principles born in France in 1789 exist today as the active mechanics of our modern 21st century reality. The abstract 18th century concept of equality before the law translates directly into modern citizens possessing the power to peacefully choose their leaders at the ballot box. The historical right to resist oppression is visible today in contemporary mass movements, where citizens fight against systemic injustice and demand accountability. And the freedom of expression demanded by the Third Estate is the foundation for the active defense of public discourse and speech today. The democratic rights of the modern world are not a permanent guarantee. They are a living forest grown from the chaotic storms of our past, one that requires constant, active cultivation.
Thank you.